What happens when one of the world's smallest nations stands up to the most powerful intelligence agency on Earth? In the heart of West Africa, a country long overlooked by the global stage has just delivered a message Washington never expected to hear. In less than 48 hours, Burkina Faso ordered U.S. intelligence operatives to leave its soil. No debates. No negotiations. Just a bold ultimatum: get out. To the world's superpowers, it looked like madness. To millions of Africans, it looked like history finally pushing back. Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation often described as one of the poorest in the world, has suddenly become a symbol of sovereignty in a continent tired of supervision. Its young leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, didn't just reject Western military cooperation. He called out what he described as a shadow empire of influence, one that had quietly turned African security partnerships into tools of control. For decades, Africa's fight against terrorism in the Sahel was guided, and often dictated, by Western powers. The United States, France, and their allies claimed to help stabilize the region. In reality, they built an intricate web of bases, surveillance hubs, and intelligence networks stretching from Niger to Djibouti. All in the name of security. But security for whom? Over time, what was once called coordination quietly turned into command. Information gathered by African intelligence services somehow ended up in Western hands before even reaching their own governments. Reports meant for local defense were appearing in Washington briefings and Parisian news outlets. It was as if someone else had access to the continent's eyes and ears. Across the Sahel, so-called joint intelligence facilities were set up. They looked cooperative on paper: shared data, shared technology, shared missions. But hidden behind those contracts were encryption keys, satellite access codes, and surveillance licenses. All held by foreign agencies. African officers could use the systems, but they didn't own them. They were like tenants in their own homes. This was the quiet genius of modern neocolonialism. It didn't need soldiers or flags anymore. It operated through login credentials, software updates, and remote access keys. It didn't have to occupy land when it could occupy information. When Traoré's government came to power, his officers began digging through those cooperation agreements, and what they found was alarming. Some contracts gave foreign agents unmonitored access to military communication channels. Others were signed indefinitely, with no clauses for renewal or oversight. In simple terms, Burkina Faso's most classified information was permanently exposed to outsiders. That's when the government decided enough was enough. Traoré's move wasn't a reckless outburst, it was a calculated strike against what he saw as surveillance colonialism disguised as partnership. And for the first time in decades, someone dared to pull the plug. When news broke that U.S. intelligence operatives were being expelled within 48 hours, Washington was stunned. Burkina Faso was supposed to be an ally, a partner in counterterrorism. But to the Burkina people, it was a long-awaited act of dignity. Across Africa, videos of Traoré spread like wildfire. A young leader, barely in his 30s, standing before the world and defying a superpower, not through slogans, but through action. For many, he became a symbol of what post-colonial leadership should look like: bold, unapologetic, and fiercely protective of national sovereignty. But defiance comes at a cost. The United States doesn't need to send troops to punish disobedience. It controls something far more powerful: access. Aid, trade, humanitarian funds, and international loans all flow through Western-controlled systems. When a country steps out of line, those systems can be turned off overnight. History is full of examples. In the 1950s, when Egypt's Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, Western banks froze the country's reserves. In the 1980s, Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso, a revolutionary who dreamed of an independent Africa, saw aid pipelines vanish the moment he rejected foreign loans. And today, that same pattern threatens to repeat itself. By challenging the U.S. intelligence network, Traoré wasn't just questioning one relationship. He was questioning the entire architecture of global control, a system that keeps African nations dependent through invisible chains. Washington's influence doesn't start with soldiers. It begins with the dollar. Financial systems, development projects, even humanitarian aid, all linked to Western approval. By removing the CIA's footprint, Burkina Faso effectively declared it's ready to live without those crutches. But can it? That's the question haunting analysts around the world. Because when you kick out a superpower, the vacuum doesn't stay empty for long. Traore knows that. That's why, behind the scenes, he's been busy forging new alliances, with Mali, Niger, and Guinea under the alliance of Sahel states, a bold experiment in African interdependence. These nations are now trying to replace foreign aid with shared resources, collective defense, and mutual trade. It's not easy. But it's the first serious attempt in decades to build African security that's actually African-led. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is watching and waiting. Russia sees opportunity. China sees strategy. And the West? The West sees a threat. Because for the first time, Africa isn't just asking for partnership, it's demanding respect. Western media has already begun rewriting the story. Headlines now label Traoré as radical, reckless, or authoritarian. It's the same playbook used for every leader who refuses to bend. First they question your legitimacy. Then they isolate your economy. Then they replace your narrative with the. But Traoré's move wasn't about Western approval. It was about reclaiming agency. He's not trying to impress Washington, he's trying to awaken Ouagadougou, Bamako, Niamey, and beyond. Every time a Western journalist calls him defiant, millions of Africans call him brave. Because in this new political era, pride has become its own currency, and Traoré is spending it wisely. Yet even his biggest supporters know this gamble could go either way. If Burkina Faso survives economically and militarily after expelling the CIA, it will prove that small nations can break free from global dependency. If it collapses, it becomes the cautionary tale the West will cite for decades, proof, they'll say, that Africa still needs supervision. Either way, the illusion of control has been shattered. Because the world is now watching an African leader do something unimaginable just a few years ago, draw a line and hold it. What happens next will determine far more than Burkina Faso's future. It could redefine how Africa interacts with power itself. For centuries, the continent was treated as a chessboard, its leaders as pawns in someone else's game. Now, one nation just flipped the table. So the question isn't just what happens to Burkina Faso. It's what happens to the world order when a small country refuses to obey the rules written in Washington. Can a landlocked nation, defying the CIA and the dollar, rewrite the script of sovereignty? Or will the system strike back to remind everyone who still holds the strings? Whatever the outcome, one thing is clear, the mask has fallen. The age of silent control is ending. And a new chapter of African self-determination has begun. If you believe in stories that challenge power, stories that reveal the unseen, and stories that redefine what freedom looks like, then subscribe to our channel. Because this isn't just about Burkina Faso. It's about the rise of a continent that's no longer waiting for permission to stand tall.